This podcast may contain adult themes.
This podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
The views and opinions in this podcast are expressly our own.
When I get to the workplace, I like to fuck shit up.
Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way.
Hey, are you tired of toxic workplaces and the negativity that comes with them?
We hear you, and we're here to shake things up. Welcome to Let's Break Up Toxic Workplace Stories, the podcast that's all about breaking up with workplace toxicity.
I'm Nicola, and I'm here with my co-host Gina. Together, we're going to explore real-life experiences of workplace toxicity and offer a sense of encouragement and unity.
That's right. We're tackling the tough topic of negativity in the workplace.
So join us each week as we explore the various forms of toxicity in the workplace. We'll be interviewing guests to share their experiences and offer practical solutions for dealing with workplace toxicity.
Let's Break Up is quickly becoming the go-to source for anyone looking to share and then ditch the drama and help you break up with those toxic workplaces. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell all your friends.
In this week's episode, more about you.
Yeah, let's hear about you. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us, what you're going to be talking about, just like high level overview, and what you're doing now, and then we'll get into the nitty gritties. Go for it. Tell us who you are.
So my name is Aoife O'Brien, and I suppose the way I view my work history, I've always enjoyed work. I'm really ambitious. I love getting stuck in. I love actually working. I love the process of actually doing work. And I've always had really great experiences of work where I felt really welcome, where I felt like I belonged. And there were a couple of instances where I didn't feel like that. And it kind of took me by surprise because I wasn't expecting it at all. So in one scenario, I was in Sydney, and it was very much a toxic work environment. So very misogynistic, high levels of turnover, like around 50%, really poor communication, lack of leadership, all of those kind of surefire signs that this is a toxic work environment. And I think I realized pretty quickly and stayed in that less than 18 months in total. But then the second one is maybe less toxic and more, this is not a good fit for me. I didn't feel like I was excelling in my role. Like I said, I'm really ambitious, and I thought, I have my eyes on moving and progressing in the organization. I didn't feel fulfilled at work. I didn't feel like I was working to my strengths. I didn't feel like I aligned with the other people who I worked with either. So for me, that was toxic for me because I couldn't really thrive in that environment, but maybe not toxic for everyone because it just depends, I think, on who you are. So they're my kind of two stories of different types of workplace toxicity, if you like to think about it like that.
Okay. And then we want to hear towards the end what you're doing.
We need a happy ending.
Yeah, like what's your happy ending?
My happy ending is the way I suppose I look at it. So in that role in Sydney, it was about 10 yeyears ago, nearly 11 years ago since I left that role. And it gave me the idea that there has to be something better out there, that what can I as an individual do to better manage my career or help other people to better manage their careers? And how can I help organizations to create environments where people feel like they're being fulfilled through their work, where there's clear communication channels, all of that kind of stuff. So after spending 4.5 years in my most recent corporate role and then a year unemployed, not really sure what the next step was, I started a master's in organizational behavior, which I finished during the pandemic. And during that master's, I set up my own business, Happier at Work, and my own podcast, Happier at Work, as well. So there is a happy ending. It's not all that. There is life after working in a toxic environment, I suppose, is the key message, and you can get out of there.
No, I mean, I think Nicola and I are thriving now. Like, we still carry some stuff from it. Like, even though I was only there for 3.5, 4 months, like I still carry that around. I mean, ours is much newer than yours is. Like ours just happened about a year ago, more or less. So I do think there is some sort of trauma that you take from it, whether or not you want to admit it.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm sure we're going to get into your trauma. So why don't you walk us through your first toxic workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose to put a bit of context around it, I had worked previously in London and I absolutely loved my role there. I loved the organisation that I worked with and I loved the people that I worked with as well. And my original intention was to stay there for a year. And because I loved it so much, I ended up staying for 3.5 years. And the only reason I left was to apply for a visa to work in Australia, which at the time you had to apply, I think, before you turned 30. They've since changed it, of course, to increase the age now. So to put a bit of context around it, some people that I worked with in London, who I would have been friends with, had a bit of respect for, and they were working in Australia. They're working in Sydney. And so I arrived to Australia, had this fantastic experience working in Perth for 6 months on a contract. And they were kind of in touch with me the whole time saying, when are you coming to Sydney? We have this job for you. When are you getting here? So I got there and I would say, yeah, definitely a lot of promises were made. So during the interview, I asked for a lot of money and they gave me even more. So that was kind of a bonus.
Who wouldn't love that?
I know. It also kind of exacerbated, I think, imposter syndrome a little bit, thinking, oh, there must have been a clerical error here. They must have made a mistake. How could they be paying me so much money? But at the same time, it was great. And at the time, the Australian dollar was really strong. So when I converted that back into euros, or not necessarily converting it back, but thinking about how much money I was earning, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Now, also in that process, I was told during the interview process that they would imagine that I would be director within 6 months. And that was also put into the paperwork as well. So in my employment contract, they said, we would imagine that you would be promoted to director within 6 months, dependent on performance, obviously. So I arrive in the door and I have these great high expectations and high hopes for life down under, and it's all going to be really great. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then within about 2 months, I think I felt like I was up to speed. You know, the way with some organizations, it's really hard to get into their tech. It's really hard to get into their systems. Like you don't really understand what goes where and who does what. It was much simpler than I had experienced before. So I would say within a couple of months, I felt like I was up to speed on everything, to the point that other people were coming to me, asking me questions, even though they had been in the organization for longer. So I was like, oh, that's a good sign that I'm doing well. Another kind of sign, I suppose, of the toxicity was that if you've ever worked in an agency type of situation or an agency type of role, where your time is outsourced to clients. So they pay however many thousands per day, and you go and you either do work for them in the office or you go to their office and you meet with them and you do work with them. So all 5 of my days were assigned to clients. And I was quite vocal about that. And I said, how can this be that 5 days a week of my time are assigned out to clients for client work? So there's no time. Yeah, there's no time for internal meetings. There's no time for personal development. There was no time for anything else. So I was quite vocal about that. And maybe that stood against me, if you like, because, I complained and I didn't really know what the channels were, who were the people I need to complain with to make sure that this changes. So
wait, I have a question. Did I miss this, or did you already say what industry you were in?
I didn't say which industry. So for almost my entire career, I worked in fast moving consumer goods, which is CPG, consumer packaged goods in the States.
I do.
Okay, yeah. So I was on the market research side of consumer packaged goods.
Yep.
So always worked on global market research agencies. So big kind of global companies with global footprint, working with massive global footprint clients as well. So quite kind of high profile stuff, and something I thoroughly enjoyed. Now I have to say, the work, I felt like I was really utilizing my strengths, so it was really, really nice from that perspective. Now, after about 2 months in, I started to notice some things. I was like, how, why are people not picking up on this? Why are people not noticing that there's quite a high level of turnover, that there's people are kind of leaving all the time. There was unequal distribution of work. As I said, that I was outsourced for 5 days a week of my time, which no one seemed to really care about, or no one really seemed to do anything about. In terms of other signs of the culture, it was very what I would describe as old boys club. So, male senior leadership, except for HR, which I think is fairly typical in a lot of these types of organizations. So HR was the only woman of all of the senior leaders. The rest were men. The rest were white men, middle-aged white men.
Male, pale, stale.
Yes, absolutely. So, it was coming up to 6 months. I needed my visa sponsored. So they were very fast in doing that and very kind of accommodating around sponsoring me to stay there, which I'm sure cost, I don't know how much it cost because I didn't pay for it, but they would have sponsored that entire process. So I was really grateful for that. We're coming up to the
$2,500.
How much?
It's about $2,500 for it.
Okay, so it's not a huge, it's a drop in the ocean for an organization, let's say. So we were coming up to kind of probably about 6 months in, and I was looking at passing my probation, looking at there was loads of changes within the team as well. I think they restructured in the time that I was there, so less than 18 months. I think there were 2 restructures within the business, which also is kind of a funny sign of like, why do we need to restructure again? Or why are you putting people in different places? Or, I'm also have in the back of my head that they've made these promises that I was going to be a director. And because I found a journal a few years later, I'd written down that they had made 4 separate occasions, they said, and you will be promoted to director. This is in meetings, this is in writing. And so I had high hopes that I was going to be promoted. And they, to the extent that they said, what type of director would you like to be? You can be a director that manages the team. You can be a director that manages a huge client, but you don't necessarily have management responsibilities. Or you can be kind of a mix of both. And I was so flattered, that they were talking about this kind of thing. And I'm trying to think what happened. There was the most recent restructure, and there was a night out, and someone said, "Oh, the MD wants to talk to you." And I thought, this is strange, and had a few drinks. So they brought me over, and he's sort of looking at me, going, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, well, he said that you wanted to talk to me," and he's like, "No." And then that was a little bit of an odd situation. I didn't really know what was going on there.
What was the person who wanted to talk to you? The MD?
The MD, the managing director.
Oh,
so the head, basically. Yeah, the head.
No, I get it.
The Australian version of the chief executive.
Okay.
Well, CEO, she's more of a COO because you've got your own chief executive of the business.
Yeah. Okay. No,
I'm
because
curious,
I've never heard
inquiring MD, medical director, not a medical doctor.
No, I knew as much as that.
Yeah, but I never thought of that actually. I thought that was fairly, but yeah, managing director.
No,
fast forward to whenever this restructure was. I don't know exactly how much time. So if I started there I think I maybe started in February or March, and it was around September time, because I know that I was going to the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand shortly after this happened, and so I had a little bit of time off booked, and I was happily thinking, well, with this new restructure, they're going to announce that I'm going to be a director and I'm going to be managing XYZ people, or whatever team it might have been. So the expectation was that there was going to be this restructure and an announcement that I would be a director in this role. So I thought, this is fantastic. And I came in. Yeah.
I'm also curious to know, though, who had asked you to go and speak to the MD? Was it another director? Who was that?
No, I don't. Do you know what? I honestly don't remember. I just remember that someone did ask me, but I feel like they kind of set me up to make me look like a bit of an idiot.
What was the game for them to do that? Making
me look like a bit of an idiot, I think.
But what did they have to like? What was the reason why they would possibly want to make you look like an idiot?
I don't know. I think it could be that it's that toxic type of work environment.
Yeah.
That they're just trying to kind of undermine you or make you look like you're incompetent or you don't know what you're doing or something like that. Like I don't remember exactly. I feel like it may have been the guy who I thought was going to be my future boss. And like, it was one of those drunken work nights out, like maybe a Thursday or a Friday night. Everyone had a few drinks. They were playing pool, very kind of relaxed atmosphere. But then, of course, the MD and his cronies would have been around the corner somewhere else. And someone said, oh, hey, why don't we go over? I think this guy Pete wants to talk to you. And I thought, oh, I wonder what Pete wants to talk to me about. Went over, and it was kind of like, I'd had a few drinks, everyone else had had a few drinks, and it was kind of like, what are you doing over here? And I was like, So yeah, I honestly don't know. The only thing I can think is that someone was making me look like a bit of a fool. So I arrived into work one day, and then one of my colleagues, who I had previously worked with in London, and when I first arrived in Sydney, I had actually stayed on his floor for a few weeks. Like, he was very generous from that perspective. But he started talking about some of my clients, saying, oh, and we're going to do this with this client, and how about we try this with that other client? And I thought, that's really odd. Like, why is he talking about my clients? Like, this all happened over a bit of time, as opposed to just kind of coming in and going straight away. But, he just turned around, at one point I said, but, they're my clients. Like, why are you talking as if you're managing my clients? And he said, oh, I'm your boss now. I just thought, exactly.
Wait. How did we go from like 0 to no change management to a new boss with
like no warning?
Exactly. No warning whatsoever. Absolutely no warning. And not only no warning, but the promise, like, this is what bothers me the most, I think, is and what kind of director would you like to be? And would you like to manage a team, or would you like to do this? And then to have that happen to me. And I was just completely and utterly blindsided by that. I really was not expecting it at all. And not to kind of toot my own horn, but like, this guy was a bit of a muppet, and he was in, well,
that's my
I would
favorite
say
insult.
he's a bit of a dick. I would consider a dick to be someone who's not a nice person. He's not. It's not that he's not a nice person. He's a nice person, but he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Let's say that. He's a bit of an idiot. He's a bit of a muppet. He wasn't the best at the role. And suddenly he's in a management position for the first time, and he's managing me, who was his former peer, who, dare I say, was actually better at the job than he was.
I'm sure you
not
were.
afraid to say that.
No, though. Like, I'm so curious. Like, how did he get the job over you? Like, where was?
And when did that happen?
Now let me see. I joined, I think, around February or March, and that happened, I think, in September. So what's that, 6 or 7 months into the role? So that's what that happened. Why did he get that role? I have my own suspicions as to why, because if we jump forward to when I resigned, the first thing he did when I handed in, and if I have ever resigned from a role, I hand in my letter. I don't say I'm resigning, I need to type up a letter. I say I'm resigning, and here's my letter of notice. The first thing he did was run down to HR to put in my letter. And the reason I think he did that was, if someone else found out, they may have tried to convince me, or they may have intercepted it at some point to convince me to stay, to offer me more money, to offer me something different. And I suspect, this is total and utter, I have no grounds for believing this, only the fact that the situation that I was in, that he threatened to leave. And therefore they put him into that position instead of me.
Because they wanted to keep him.
Because they wanted to keep him. And maybe they thought, because they'd sponsored me, and they would have sponsored him as well, but maybe they thought, with the golden handcuffs, there's no way that I was going to leave, because I've been sponsored, they were paying me all this money. And I know that he was getting paid less money than I was, even when he was my manager. So because of the conversation that we had.
I kind of secretly love that, because it's like, I honestly would rather have more money in the bank than a title.
Yeah.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Because, like, you know what? You go on, you take those responsibilities. Let me just be a worker among workers, a worker bee, and let me just
earn my millions.
Yeah, earn my money, stack my cash, as my business partner would say. I don't think that's, I mean, yes, it's completely fucked up the way they did it, but like for you, I feel like you're still kind of winning.
Yeah. And he probably, could have access to all of that type of information through the HR system or whatever he'd be seeing, because I know we had a separate conversation. He used to bring me out for coffees to have these kind of frank discussions about our working relationship. Yeah. And
was it problematic, the working relationship, or?
Yeah. And I made it problematic because I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with this situation whatsoever. No.
So what was the thing that made
I like
you
how we've just unpacked it, that actually Aoife's the toxic person.
Were you toxic, or were you advocating for yourself, or were you just being a brat and being like, I should have had the job? Like
a little from column A, a little from column B, a little from column C. Yeah. Advocating for myself. So I went to the client service director, who was the one who had that conversation, and I said, I understand now that this guy Paul is my boss now. So, based on our previous discussion, my understanding was that Justin was going to be my boss, and actually we were that I was going to be a director. He goes, oh, yes. It's that, Justin, Paul is really your supervisor, and Justin, yes, well, if you have any problems, you can go to Justin, or if you want mentoring, you go to just, like, it was all this absolute and utter bullshit, basically.
He didn't know what the hell he was saying if he said it like that.
No, he really didn't. And I complained a few times directly to him. And one of my good friends at work, actually, he used to refer to him as a spineless piece of shit. Yeah, because, well,
I actually have a few people from where we work, Nicola, that I could refer to as a spineless piece of shit.
Yeah,
I'm here for that.
I feel like it's a special type of person, and I feel like that doesn't fall into the category of the category.
Yeah.
The category of those particular individuals. They were.
Oh, I do. I think the CEO and the COO were both.
They had two brain cells to rub together, but one of those brain cells was Jesus.
I don't know. I thought that they all lacked any kind of moral fiber. They lacked complete moral fiber and integrity.
Oh no, but they did, because they had Jesus in them.
Those are okay. We're digressing.
So that makes them good. Because they were
Meanwhile,
Jesus fans. So anyway, we have I'm dealing with this spineless piece of shit. And actually, do you know what? There's so much more to unpack from the aftermath of this change than I had previously remembered. But yeah, I was absolutely being a bit of a brat. I was, kind of challenging his authority. The way he used to manage me, he totally micromanaged me, which was really frustrating for me. He would look in my diary. That's not how I manage my time, but he would look into my calendar and be like, "Oh, it looks like you have all of this free time. So here's basically a fuck ton of work for you to do." And I was like, "Hey, hold up here. I don't have time to do all of this stuff." That's not how I manage my time. I manage my to-do list by writing it out here. I don't create blocks of time in my calendar. But he wasn't really listening to that at all. At the other side, I feel bad now when I reflect back on it, but there is someone who was more junior on the team, and I used to just complain to her all the time. Like, we were working on a similar account together. I wanted to have less touch time with the client and let her do more. And my boss's boss made the decision that I was going to be the one to spend all of the time with the client and not the other way around. So again, I felt like they were making decisions that they knew I didn't want to happen. And it was kind of like they were pushing me out the door almost. But at the same time, they're like, there was one time where both of them pulled me into a meeting room, and this is still odd to this day. It was one of those old school meeting rooms. We had never ever used it before. I don't think I had ever been in there before. And there was a two-way mirror on the side. Okay.
Sure.
And yeah. And
What are
they
we doing
kind
in
of
this
made
meeting
a
room?
joke.
Usually.
Exactly.
What
So
did you
me on
say,
one
Nicola?
side,
What are we
those
doing in
two.
this meeting room usually?
Well, usually it would be to look at the research.
It'd be some sort of
group,
focus.
right?
Well, it'd be a focus
A
group.
focus
Yeah.
group,
So
yeah.
you'd have someone on the other side. But I think it was an old meeting room. I certainly had never been into it. We didn't conduct any focus groups.
So how did it make you feel? You're like in this weird
ambushed.
like jail room.
Oh.
Yeah, totally ambushed. So, and they made a joke at the start, like, oh yeah, Pete and I'm trying to even remember his name.
Pete and Harry are on the other
Pete
side
and
of the
Harry
mirror.
are on the other, exactly. They made this kind of joke, but to me
Which
it was
is
kind of like,
probably a tell. Somebody probably was watching.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I just kind of, I think at that point went along with whatever it was that they were saying, and it was just kind of, yeah. And that might have been the catalyst then for me to literally, on the train, on the way in to work the next day, I typed up my letter of resignation and I handed in my notice. And I think prior to that, I had been looking for other roles in other organizations, and it wasn't hard at the time to get a job there. And you could get sponsorship relatively easily, because I think they wanted people with the specific skills, and it wasn't a problem. So I was looking around for other roles, and eventually it just got to the stage where I just thought, this is not worth it. Like, I'm not being valued here at all. I'm being totally micromanaged. They're telling me one thing, they're not standing by that, and they're doing all of these kind of other weird things to me as well. So and then so when I handed in my notice, that's when I said, so Paul ran down to HR and handed them my resignation, and there was no kind of follow-up. There was no talk anymore about it. There was a handover, I think, and there may have been this weird thing where if you worked a certain day, then you got paid for 5 days or something. So like if I said that my last day was on a holiday, then I would have got paid 3 extra days wages. Sure. And I just thought, I think I'm going to extend my leave as a favor to you and to work on my clients. So I ended up getting paid more basically for time that I wasn't actually working, because it would have been a weekend and a holiday. So so I left, and on my last day, the spinous piece of shit came over and said, I heard you're leaving. I'm sorry to hear you're leaving. And that was kind of it. It was like, okay.
There was like no exit interview, nothing?
There was an exit interview with HR, and I think the person who interviewed me was new. She was relatively new, and I would have told them all of this, like, this is what happened, this is what I was told, and this is what happened, and that's why I'm leaving, essentially. But I think they have those box ticking where they're like, left for a new opportunity, where it's like, no, exactly. I didn't leave for a new opportunity. I left because I was treated like total and utter garbage. Yeah. And like, I remember there were times when I'd be on the phone to my mum, crying down the phone to her, and she always reminds me that that it was that type of environment. It was so misogynistic that you were asking me, why was he promoted and why was I not promoted? Because probably of the old boys club, a misogynistic. And if you've ever spent time in Australia, and I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush, but it is that there is that type of mentality in some of the work cultures over there, where it's very male dominated at those senior levels, and kind of very male focused. I got out. This left me with no job and no income in Australia, so and no visa as well, I might add. So I left the job, and I kind of made the decision to leave Sydney, because, as you know, it's trendy to work in a place for 2 or 3 years. You can't just kind of go somewhere and stay for a few months. It's not really cool. So what I ended up doing was I worked my notice. I had traveled quite extensively around Australia already, but what I did was I flew over to Perth, and I traveled the rest of Australia. And someone was really smart and they said, you know what? In order to get a tourist visa, you don't actually need to leave Australia. You don't need to fly to New Zealand, and come back. You can do a paper application. And I thought, a paper application? Would that sound, Now, as it turns out, I think the paper application was something like $200. So it probably would have just been easier to fly over to Auckland for a weekend and fly back again and automatically get a tourist visa. And because it was done on paper, I was waiting to hear over email. So in the outback, up somewhere near Darwin, waiting to get an email to say that my...
Oh God, you were in the wop-wops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that it had been approved. But I had a fantastic time traveling around Australia for about 3 months. And then I went to Fiji on my way home. I went to New Zealand to visit friends. I met up with family in Hawaii. And I flew into San Francisco. I hired a car. I stayed with cousins and I drove the Highway 1 down to LA. I met up with a friend in Denver. I went to up to Canada, to Vancouver Island, Montreal, and then back to New York, Washington, DC, Philadelphia, and had the most amazing time. So I was in New York for Thanksgiving, in the run up to Thanksgiving. The night before Thanksgiving in New York City was the best time. And
the big night to go out. Everyone goes out and gets shit-faced.
Fun. It was so fun. And then the next day that was around the time, I want to say, of Sandy. Would that be right? Like 2012?
Hurricane Sandy?
2012, thereabouts.
Sandy. Yeah. It was like 2013, maybe? Or
would it be 12?
Could be 12. It could have been 12.
Yeah.
2012.
So I think that had just happened, and my friend kindly invited me to stay with her and her family for Thanksgiving, and her sister had to move out of her house because it was flooded. Like, there was all of this crazy stuff going on. And then I went home for Christmas and I flew back to the States, and I had a massive trip around South America for 6 months, which was also incredible. But maybe coming back to this idea of trauma that you mentioned, like, I really feel it, and it's kind of still there now. This is 10 years later, and I still think of just how it knocked my confidence, and it took so long. But it was all aspects of my life. It wasn't just from a work perspective. It was kind of in my personal life as well. It's this worthiness, I'm not good enough, what did I do wrong? All of these things were kind of going on for me as well. So it definitely has this huge impact, which I suppose is why with what you're doing as well, it's so important for people to recognize the signs and to get out of those situations early, because I think we convince ourselves that it's going to get better, that it's going to somehow change, that it's, and I certainly in my second experience, I feel like I was going through these spirals where it was spiral out of control. And then I'd be like, oh no, something good has happened, so it's all good. And then it would spiral out of control again. And it's just, I suppose the message is that there's more to life. And my whole ethos now is around creating happier working environments. Like, it's not all fluffy, duffy, things like that, but it's more about focusing on what are the actions that we can take to create those environments where people want to actually stay and want to connect and want to feel like they belong. Because if you asked people who wants to work in a toxic environment, I think most people would say, no, I don't want to work in a toxic environment. Maybe some people wouldn't care. They kind of only care about money or something like that. But I think for the majority of people, they want to work in an environment where they feel valued and where they feel like they're making a contribution,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. So tell us a little bit kind of what steps organizations can take, or what is the things that you think are kind of the top ways to avoid us heading into a toxic workplace?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you ask kind of from the both sides. I think, like, for me, what I've learned over the last 5 years since I've left corporate is through the masters that I did, like, I told my lecturers about the experiences that I had. And one of my lecturers said, oh, that sounds like a fit issue. So it sounds like this, so I was using this terminology around fit. as opposed to working in a toxic environment, which I've only recently kind of looked back and said, no, actually that was toxic. It wasn't a fit issue at all. So I became obsessed with this idea of fit and what it means and what we can do to feel like we fit in at work. And so the first thing that came through, and this I learned this through coaching and also on the masters, is knowing what our values are. So our values are the kind of core of our being. It's how we make decisions. It's how we act in certain ways. And we don't always act in line with what our values actually are, but knowing what those core values are and what you truly believe in is really important. So if you think of that from the organization's perspective, oftentimes, and I've worked in organizations, they'll have something plastered on the wall to say, we are this, we are simple, we are ethical, we are whatever it is that they say. But unless those behaviors are realized and seen by people in the organization, then it's total and utter bullshit. So first of all, you need to have values.
They're just like,
Core
that's
values
what
currently
did
give Gina the heebie-jeebies.
Oh, God.
The cool values.
Core values.
Oh, the core values. Sorry.
It's the core values are Gina's huntsman spider.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It's like my bugaboo, because I'm like, how about you hire people who you believe embody integrity and who you think will do the right thing in any given situation, who aren't afraid to ask for help, who aren't afraid to say, is there a better way to do this? I'm doing it this way. Maybe you have a better way, like to trust their higher ups. And it's like,
Now, okay, so Gina, from what you're saying, what it sounds like to me is you have values for efficiency, integrity, and there was something else that came up there.
Don't be afraid to ask for help, or to say, is there
don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah, easier way to do this. Like, to me, that's efficiency. And I'm a huge, like, I love, creating efficiencies and making things easier for people to do. The thing with core values is if you have them or if you state them, then you need to make sure that they're being lived. So it's not just a case of saying that these are the core values. It's understanding the behaviors in the organization. And then also at an organizational level, you need to recognize and reward those positive behaviors. And you need to, I can't think of a better word, but reprimand the behaviors that go against those values. So if there's people who are being spineless.
Somebody else we talked to, and I'm totally forgetting which person said this, but they were like, everything's based on performance, but what about the things that aren't performance related that still make you a good employee? Like what you're saying, like, yes, they are full of integrity. Yes, they're not afraid to ask for help. They're truly good. Everyone's like, oh, I collaborate well with stakeholders. People who truly have the ability to.
Everyone collaborates well with stakeholders, apparently.
I know.
Yes.
Some people are better at that than other people, right? Yeah. It's like, I would say that, like, for instance, Nicola, in my company, Victoria is much better at collaborating with stakeholders. Whereas I'm like, what the fuck do you want? I've been doing this for like 20 years. Why do I have to like do this whole like, so it's like, but like, I'm really efficient. So it's like, I'm probably the most efficient in the company in terms of what I do, but Victoria is the best at, collaborating with
relationships
stakeholders.
And things.
And like Nicola is also super efficient and creative, and our art department is not as efficient as I'd like it to be, but they're very smart. So it's like everyone has their has the place that they excel at. So we should reward those things as well, right? It shouldn't just be performance based. It shouldn't just be and I feel like core values are so dumb. If they don't make sense, or if people aren't embodying them.
Well, we had that in the last organization I worked in. We had the what and the how, but like at the same time, if you're looking at performance and you're kind of looking at it once a year, which is usually the case, and I'll get on to how we measure performance in a second, because that was awful. It's kind of, pulling back the curtain on how things really happen in organizations. But the what and the how, but it's only once a year. And so you need maybe one example for each type of core value, and it's not enough, and it can be very generic as well. So it's really thinking about how you show up on a day-to-day basis and equipping managers with the ability to have those hard discussions if people are not meeting expectations in terms of the behaviors that they have. So that's all kind of from the organization's perspective. The other thing that came from the research is this idea of need satisfaction at work. So we all have these inherent needs. There are 3 universal needs that everyone has. The need for autonomy. So that's a sense of choice and control over what you do and how you do it. The need for relatedness, how you get along with other people, but also how you relate what you do on a day-to-day basis to the impact that it has on your end user, your end client, whatever that might be. And then competence, so feeling capable of doing the job. And it's not just about satisfying those needs, it's about finding the balance. So if you take autonomy as an example, if you're being micromanaged, then you have no sense of autonomy. You're being told what to do, how to do it, probably when to do it as well. But if you have too much autonomy, then maybe you're lacking the guidance that you need to know, well, what are the expectations in this role? What direction are we heading in with this project? But also, as you progress through your career, you're going to need less and less, more and more autonomy as you progress, because you become more competent and effective in yourself. So they're the 2 standout things that I found. The other aspect that I looked at was this idea of your strengths at work, which we tend to focus on a lot when it comes to job postings and things like that. We'll say like, oh, and this job requires X number of years of experience, or requires these types of skills. And we tend to focus on those over and above the culture of the organization. And I think if we hire people who are a right fit for that culture, and some people call it culture fit, and other people argue that culture add is something different. I would kind of argue that if you have the right person for the role, then it's going to add. It's going to add, and it's going to fit.
Yeah. I'm
going to fit, and it's going to add.
I'm currently recruiting for someone on my team at the moment, and the recruitment lady called me and she's like, when I'm vetting people, what are you looking for? I said, it doesn't matter what it says on the job ad. I want to know that the person is, engaging and interested and curious, and that they're going to be a good fit for the team. And everything else can be taught. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm not too worried. Like, everything else can be learned.
So, but then that leads me to say, like, what if someone presents as if, like, right, so in the interviewing process, each side is on their best behavior, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Except for where we met, because they were like a shit. I should have realized what a shit show it really was.
Yeah, we gave you all
based on just the interviews alone. Yeah. No, I didn't. I thought that they were just like very all inexperienced, and what the hell did I know? Like, what the hell did they know? And I could definitely whip this and turn it around. But anyway, point being is, you could present one way and then get into the job and be a total like dead weight.
Yeah.
Or in my case,
you run the risk, right? Like, you absolutely run the risk. And I think even if you, as a leader, even if you get a dead weight, let's say, for example, I go through this process and I meet someone and I'm like, oh, this person looks like they would be an awesome fit, right? Like, what an opportunity. They come in and they suck balls right out of
the gate. Yeah.
Like, straight out of there. And I think as a leader, it's my responsibility to have those hard conversations with people to say, hey, you're not meeting the expectations. B, what can I do as a leader to make you feel more engaged? Because obviously we haven't hit the mark for you. What can I do better?
Yeah, 100%. It is. It's about like what additional resources can I give you, but also setting those really clear expectations at the start. And, I'm talking more and more recently about this idea of setting expectations around time. Like, how long should something take? Because sometimes if we have 4 days to do something, we take 4 days to do it, when actually it should only really take 2 days. Or if we have 4 hours and, it should take 2 hours. So how do you define how long something should take if someone is really up to speed and they're quick and they're efficient and they're using their strengths to do this work? So setting those clear expectations around time and quality at the start is really important, so that then you can have those hard conversations if someone's not meeting those expectations. I think that's really, really important to be able to do that. So brilliant point. And I think from the perspective of the individual, how do I not enter into that type of scenario? Again, it's knowing the values, it's being able to assess. And you're so right, Gina, that on both sides, we're kind of putting on this mask for the interviewing process. Now, I'm seeing this changing over time where it's more of a conversation, and it's really about assessing exactly, as you said, Nicola, the fit between the individual and the organization, because if either side is the wrong fit, then it costs both sides money and energy, and it causes a bit of heartache as well. So knowing what exactly you're looking for and being honest about that. And if I think back to my job seeking days, sometimes it's kind of like, and I'm a huge Simpsons fan, by the way, so like is it Lionel Hutz, and he says Marge Simpson becomes a realtor, and he says, well, Marge, it's about finding the right house for the right person. And then he goes on to say, the right house is the house that's for sale, and the right person is anyone. So sometimes it's a little bit like that with jobs, isn't it? Like the right job is the job that's being advertised, and the right person is anyone, and we need to move away from that mentality. And again, as an individual, it's not a scattergun approach. It's being really selective about what you want. And especially if someone's listening now and they're in a toxic situation and they're trying to get the hell out of there as quickly as possible, it's so easy to go into another toxic situation because you haven't taken the time to carefully think about what you want and what you don't want, and what you stand for and what you stand against, and what kind of culture would really work for you. Having said that, you can also take those mistakes, let's call them, as a learning opportunity, and be like, okay, so not like, why is this keep happening to me, but rather, what can I learn from this, and what can I take into my next role going forward? Some of the people I've been speaking to recently about toxic work environments, they're kind of afraid. If they've only been in a role for a few months, they're like, what does this look like on my CV? And I would say, you can easily explain that it wasn't a good cultural fit, or you didn't get to use your strengths, whatever it might be, So, but this idea of being on your best behavior during the interview process, I think it's, again, from the interviewer's side, I've been at that other side where you're kind of desperate to get anyone into the job, because as the person hiring, I was going to have to do the job, which would double my workload if I didn't get someone in. So it's rethinking that. And as a manager, how do we address those issues up front, or how do we plan in advance for if there's going to be gaps in the team? How do we account for that? How do we allow for that? Because
kind of that continuity planning and succession planning.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, for me, it was like, let's just get bums on seats. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they can do. We just need someone in to do the work, because I don't have time to do two people's work, Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you, now that you're working for yourself, you have your own business, what are you doing? Like, how are you kind of putting this into, into practice, and how do you help your clients from that side? Are you helping individuals or organizations, or both?
Both. So I decided from the outset to take a two-pronged approach, because I want to help individuals and educate them about what the important things are when it comes to being happier at work, because I saw so many people who are miserable. Like there's like, according to Gallup, 85% of people globally who are disengaged at work. Like, that's crazy, and the perception that work is something that's hard and it's something that's not really fun. And I suppose I want to change that perception. So I do work with individuals, but I also work with organizations in a few different capacities, and I kind of overlap them a little bit as well. So I do quite a bit of speaking. So I do public speaking. So yesterday, as we're recording this, yesterday was International Women's Day, and I spoke with the Central Bank of Ireland here in Ireland. There in Ireland, I'm in Tenerife at the moment. But that was all about imposter syndrome. So that's something I talk an awful lot about as well. But not just imposter syndrome for individuals, but the systemic issues that women face. as well in the workplace. So it's not just about saying, oh, well, you have imposter syndrome. It's about creating the conditions where women can actually thrive. So things like having flexible working, having return to work policies, having role models, having sponsors, having mentors, having coaching, all of these types of things, specific leadership development for women. So I do speaking, I run programs as well, the Happier at Work program, which is for individuals as well as for organizations. So I'm doing the pilot with organizations at the moment, like a live pilot before turning it into something that's a bit more scalable. And again, educating people on all of the things that I've learned over the last 5 years, plus the nearly 20 years working in my corporate roles as well. I do a little bit of research on the side. So given my background is with working with data and that kind of thing, I do a bit of research, and I love to go back to my kind of data roots. And there was one more thing. Oh yeah, my imposter to empowered. So in relation to imposter syndrome, I do my imposter to empowered program in organizations as well as with individuals. So
I would love
lots
to
of
know more
different.
about that, because I struggle with imposter syndrome
Yeah.
all the
Everyone does. I say everyone, but they say the research shows that 70% of people experience it. I don't know where that originates from, but that's the statistic that I see everywhere. I carried out my own research into it last year, and it showed that 90% of people experienced it at some point, with like it was kind of 50-50 split. So 45% were currently experiencing it, or 45% had previously experienced it.
I mean, I think I've experienced it without even realizing that I experienced it.
Oh yeah, same. I didn't realize what it was until someone said to me, "Oh, that sounds like imposter syndrome," and I was like, "What? What's imposter syndrome?" So I had to look it up and find out more about it. This is
because
when
like
I was.
I compare myself to like my old boss, and I never feel like I measure up.
Okay, yeah.
And I feel like that's part of, it's like you're never, like in your own mind, you're never going to be as successful or whatever. And you might not, but that doesn't mean you're not successful in your own right, So it's like a mindset shift. I have a mind shift.
Mind shift that.
It actually is a mind fuck. If you're comparing yourself to others is a mind fuck.
Yeah.
But I think that until that narrative changes within you as a human, you're always going to feel like you're not good enough. And I struggle with that daily.
Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah. It's really interesting what you said, Gina, because it's what is our definition of success. And if you're looking at someone else and you're like, that's my definition of success, but it's actually what someone else has already attained, then you can't help but compare yourself to that and how you're tracking against that. So maybe it's rewriting that script and saying, well, what's my own definition of success? And, like the topic of success could probably be a whole separate episode, because we're brought up to believe that it's the big house, it's a nice car, it's the family, it's the partner, it's, there's all of these things that we're brought up to believe are success, and, through the media, through movies, all of that kind of thing. And so it's really hard when we start thinking about, well, what is our own definition of success? Like I'm living remotely in Tenerife at the moment. Like that's amazing, but I need to remind myself that this is something that's really good, and it's great that I have the opportunity to do this. Having a degree of flexibility when you're working for yourself, I think is a huge milestone of success that people need to be aware of. Being able to generate your own income, not having to rely on, from getting income from an employer.
Company.
So things like that, I think we need to remind ourselves that there are other definitions of success out there, and maybe to dig deep and figure out, well, what's our own definition of success?
Yeah.
I'm still working on it.
Yeah. I mean, from everything you just said, I'm like, okay, well, I have all of that, but it's like, why don't I feel successful? Right. Yeah. So it's probably an inside job. It's like, I have to look at myself and be like, why is this not enough for you? And it's like, for me, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I'm always highlighting the things that I wish I did differently, rather than saying, I've been self-employed for the past 12 years. This is my company. I built it from scratch. There were multiple times during COVID where I thought we might not make it, and we're healthy enough to have made it, So it's like, I don't think of those things, I think of, well, we're not making our revenue, Nicola, your favorite word, our revenue is like paltry comparison to pre-COVID. You know what I mean? Like I highlight the negative, whereas I should be like, wow, we made it through a really hard time. Like COVID was really tough. Like a lot of things out of our control happened, you know, so like good for us for being healthy, you know. But
do you do gratitude? Like, do you practice gratitude?
In my
it's something I know I should, but then why not in business as well? And be like, here's what I'm grateful
I
for.
don't know
Here's
why.
all of the things. Yeah.
It's a good idea. It's
something I constantly say that I should do, and I don't. Yeah, much like journaling. I'm like, oh, I really must journal about that. I really must write out my list of things that I'm grateful for. But I'm so with you on that. Like, I think it's so easy. And if I think of my own business journey, what I see is where I'm going to. I don't see where I've been or what I've achieved up to now. I see, here's the big picture of where I'm going, and I'm nowhere near there, you know, and like there's such a wide gap between
and I think
where I
feel
now
the same
and how
way.
to get there. Yeah.
Especially
you know
having...
what, we're doing exactly the same thing for the podcast as well. We're like, oh, we've hit like huge, you know, milestones, and we're like, those aren't good enough.
Yeah.
What's next? Let's go.
And that's how I feel about my entire like life. I'm like, I'm always looking for more. And it's like, why though? Like, why can't I be content with everything that I have?
Yeah.
Right.
One thing that I'm learning more and more to do is to be, it sounds a bit kind of airy fairy, but to be in the present moment. And by that, from a work context, I mean, it's not about saying, I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be happy when I reach that milestone. It's about enjoying the process. I mean, your day-to-day job. Do you enjoy what you do on a day-to-day basis? Or are you waiting till such a time when you've made it that I'm going to enjoy it then, or I'm going to have more money to be able to enjoy myself outside of work then?
You know what? It's funny because when we were making a shit ton of money right before COVID, I still didn't feel successful. So it's like we're making less for, again, reasons outside of our control. But like, what does that really mean for me? Because I felt the same with like never having to worry about a bank account.
Exactly.
And now kind of having to worry about a bank account again. So it's like, I should just be like, fuck off, Gina, you're fine. Like,
exactly. It comes back to, what is it? Like, it's like with gratitude, you see abundance. So being grateful for the things that you have, not only will you notice those things more, but more of those things will come into your life, probably because you're noticing them more.
Yeah, I agree. Nicola, should we start, instead of like just like getting straight into it every morning via text message, should we just like write a gratitude list to each other?
I love it.
You like that idea? Are
we starting Thankful Thursdays up?
No, it would be every fucking day, like a nightmare. It's not
every day.
Every day is a day to be grateful, not just Thankful Thursdays.
Yeah. You know who invented Thankful Thursdays?
You?
Yeah.
Well, I think the idea was good, but I think the execution was poor.
Yeah, it started off good. It started off good.
So what she's referring to is the place that we met. Everyone was remote, so we were like heavily into Slack. So I did not realize this, but you started Thankful Thursday where people would just like.
Okay, I'm so grateful for them because they've made my life so wonderful. Oh my God, I'm so
grateful for my team.
No, so it would. I mean, and I've told the story before, but it would be like, the CEO or the COO would be like, I didn't kill my child when he made me really pissed off. I'm so happy that I didn't. And everyone would be like, oh my God, that's amazing.
You're such a great parent.
You're doing a great job. Parenting is so hard. And then it would be someone like me or Nicola. And I'd be like, I'm really grateful. You know, my partner was there to help me through my foot surgery or whatever it was. And crickets.
Yeah. Okay.
Crickets. So clearly we all know where I stood, or someone like myself or Nicola stood.
And then before you started, there was this like passive aggressive thing with your team, right? Because your team Okay, your team would post to Thankful Thursday saying, oh my God, I love this person so much. They're such a great team member and a friend. I love them.
They were a team of 2 fucking people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
yeah,
then
yeah.
I would
Besties.
and mine would be like, oh my God, I'm so grateful for my whole team, the entire giant.
You know what though? You had a part to play in that whole like feud, because she wouldn't back down. She'd be like, no, this one's a bitch. And I'd be like, okay, but like, who cares? We have so much work to do. Can we just focus on getting the work done?
Yeah. Yeah. So Thankful Thursdays was not successful. Poor implementation.
But the thing is like, it would have made much more sense to like have a gratitude, like rolling list where people could just say they're grateful for anything at any time.
But
like there were times that I was
vulnerable about what you were grateful for though, because that was the issue. It was toxic positivity, right? So you had this issue around, it had to be positive. You couldn't be grateful for the fact that you survived the week and you didn't have a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
But I am grateful for that, like literally every week.
Every Friday.
Last week, we both had meltdowns last week.
We did, but at the same time, like we knew they were coming, and we kind of like cushioned ourselves. We were like, okay, so I know, but I don't know, so I used to do gratitude lists with someone that I'm still friends with. We just got out of the habit of doing them, and like I would do like 5 points. I'd be like, I'm grateful for today's opportunities at work. I'm grateful for my daughter. I'm grateful for, her nanny. I'm grateful for my mom. Like it could just be simple things like that,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it doesn't require a response from the other person. Like you could say, Nicola, like, I'm grateful Quinn makes me cups of coffee every morning.
I am grateful he makes me coffee.
So it's like, it's not something that even needs a response. It's just like, here's what I'm grateful for. And your response would be your gratitude list. It wouldn't be like,
oh my God, that's amazing.
No, it's just like you respond with your gratitude list. Yeah.
Okay,
I'm on board. Let's do it.
Okay, let's start it tomorrow.
And you can talk to people about it on the podcast every week as well.
It could be our pregame chat. What were you most grateful this week for this week?
This is such a good lead up for the start of other podcasts. This was a happy ending. Thank you.
It was a happy ending. We're both so here for it. All right. Well, I had technically toe surgery, but it wasn't really. Like, I don't consider it surgery, but they do cut your foot open a little bit.
Wow.
So I'm going to go off and do what I need to do at this next appointment that I have. It was just ingrown toenails because I'm old and I walk too much and I do too many things with my feet. So it's like par for the course.
Each of the things that carry you through life, be kind to those.
Yeah. I know. And like, quick side note, I gained so much weight during pregnancy that it like fucked up my feet, like for good.
Pregnancy makes your feet go flat.
Well, my little feet, they're very small. As you know, they're like a US size 6, right? They're used to carrying around a Gina that's like max 115 pounds, maybe 120 if it's around the holidays, because I can't say no to homemade cookies. So those feet went from 120 max to over 180.
Wow.
In a span of like, and in fact, I was 108 when I got pregnant. So in a span of 9 months, I gained like 70 pounds. So they were like, what is going on? So it like fucked up my entire feet. So it's been like a shit show ever since.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're welcome. All right. So Aoife, where can we find you? What are the deets about where we can find you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So best place to go is probably my website, which is happieratwork.ie. So .ie is for Ireland. All of my socials are linked there. If people are into LinkedIn, then you can find me, and I will spell out my name because it's complicated for people who are outside of Ireland. It's Aoife for Aoife, and then Obrien. I hope I said that correctly.
H-whore.
Or
so you will find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm fairly active, very active on LinkedIn, and also fairly active on Instagram. They'd be kind of my two channels that I'm post on most regularly. But yeah, best place to go would be the website happierwork.ie, but also search, since you're listening to a podcast, search for Happier at Work in whatever app you're using to listen to podcasts, and check me out there.
Double podcast whammy, kill it.
Exactly.
And
We're so fancy.
oh my God, we're podcasting with podcasters. What has just
Yay.
unfolded?
I do need to go. Well, thank you so much. I absolutely loved this chat, and we must stay in touch. And
Well, tell us what you found out
non-podcast
about
related.
monetizing from the podcast.
Yes, I will.
Send us an email, because we need to know.
Take care.
Okay,
Bye,
guys.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. If you would like to share your story, we would love to hear from you.
Also, leaving a review helps us create more content because it shows us there's an interest in this topic.
For those of our listeners who do better with reading, we have closed caption available on YouTube.
See you next week, same time and same place.